First one, it's been 5 months now since we've been here. It is amazing. I think it's really been a nice, nice layout. I'm working on it, Mike. I'm a snowbird, and I just got back, so I'm enjoying this cool weather. Yeah, it's 80 degrees when I left. Anyway, I'm president of the Squirrel Hill Historical Society, and my name's Jim Hammond. All of our members and guests, and we have a Zoom audience. We'd like to welcome everybody also. This program is being recorded and will be available on our website to view in a few days. And I already said this is our 5th month, which is, we were just going to try it for 3, but I think this is really working out great. And I watched the Zooms from Florida, and they do real well. So, yeah, like the CD, the audio, screens, we don't have to put up chairs or tables. Yeah, that was a hard one. We're all getting old. At 80 plus, I don't want to carry too many chairs around. Okay, anyway, like I said, I was president. We were vice presidents. Helen Wilson and Alex Buscan is over here doing the audio. And we have to thank him for getting us in here and keeping everything running. Recording secretary, Audrey Fletman back there on the camera. Treasurer's Rod. Where's Rod at? I saw you over there at the table. Email coordinator. And Neil Loghouse president, and now a new historical board member of American Legion is Tony. Where's Tony? Oh, there you are, right there, Tony. Program coordinators, Todd Miller and Toby Chapman. Membership chair, Stanley Klein. We have a couple researchers, Todd Wilson, Charles Shukov, and our past treasurer is here, Emily Young. She was a treasurer for years and years and kept everything ordered around. Okay, I'm going to have Tony come up for a minute, and then following that will be Helen.
You heard Jim and I both joined the American Legion post in Squirrel Hill. It's behind Moore's Jewelry. It's the historic location where they've been since 1938. Keep reading the newsletter because, with my help, now that I'm their historian, we'll be getting more information on that post. But there are 2 events coming up in May that we'd like to invite you to and ask for your help with. A couple of people here read the newsletter. This Saturday at 11 o'clock, there will be replacing the flags in the ceremony. A lot of you may perhaps remember doing that in your youth. That tradition goes on. VFWs, American Legions do this across the country. Our group does it for Smithfield Cemetery. So the invitation's out there. You don't have to call me. Just show up at 11 o'clock. The back gate on Dallas Avenue is where we'll meet, and we'll give you some flags and help you through that. Those of you who want to come on Memorial Day, which is a Monday, a couple of weeks later, there will be a formal ceremony at the American Legion Post Memorial, which is down at the intersection of Forbes Avenue, Dallas, and Beechwood, if you know where that little triangle is. That ceremony starts at 1 o'clock. So without further ado, here's Helen Wilson to introduce our program.
Hello, everyone. I have just 3 announcements before I introduce the speaker. And the first is that we are planning to have a members tour of the Henry Kerner exhibit at the Boast Building. So that is on Monday, Monday, July 13th, thank you, 7 to 8:30. And this is so far is going to be for members only. It depends on the response, whether we're going to open it to others. But you can also go to the Boast Building to see this incredible exhibition of Henry Kerner's paintings. And the members' tour will be led for us, presented to us by our member, Carolyn Boyce, who is, she bought Henry Kerner's house, decided that she was going to make it her life's work to keep this incredible artist's legacy alive. And if you haven't seen the show, you can go to the Boast Building to see it. So, okay, that was the first announcement. And the second is that next month I will be giving a talk about the 4th of July celebrations in Squirrel Hill, starting in the very early years and coming all the way up to the present. A lot of incredible events happen to celebrate the 4th of July through the years. This is the nation's 250th birthday, so it's worth celebrating. Third announcement is we've been talking about Serpentine Drive and the petition, and you might have seen the report on Channel 4 yesterday about it. The petition was approved. City Council is going to schedule a hearing, and we don't know when the hearing is going to be, so we're still taking signatures because we did get we got over 25 people signing the petition, but we need people to actually come to the hearing. But of course, we don't know when it is. So if you are interested in coming to the hearing or signing the petition, you can still do it over at the back table. So I just walked it yesterday, and there were 2 people on it. So, and there's 4 trails in the valley. So some roads should be driving roads. Serpentine is a driving road. Even Bigelow planned it to be that way. The trails were for people walking. The roads in Swisshelm Park were designed to get people from one side of the park to the other side very easily, quickly, and safely, instead of sending them on these detours on sidewalk, West Darlington, Murdoch, Steep. So anyway, so we'll let you know, we'll keep you posted about when the hearing is set. Okay, and I put my cheaters on for the announcement. Okay, let's see. To introduce our speaker. Let's see. Tonight's presentation focuses on the Swisshelm Park Solar Array, an important redevelopment and sustainability initiative planned for the brownfield site above 9 Mile Run. Our speaker is Lilly Freedman, Senior Manager of Development Projects at the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh, where she has worked since 2018 in a variety of project management and community development roles. Her work is focused on redevelopment initiatives, sustainability, and the productive reuse of former industrial land throughout Pittsburgh. Lilly holds a Master of Sustainability degree in Urban and Energy Systems from Chatham University and a bachelor's degree in Sociology, Environmental Studies, and German from Temple University, with additional studies at the Free University of Berlin. This evening, Lilly will discuss the purpose of the Swisshelm Park Solar Array, its current status, and how the project reflects Pittsburgh's transition from its industrial past to a cleaner energy future. Lilly?
Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. It's here with you all today. We really appreciate your interest in the project, and I'm excited to share with you some of the history of how we got here, where we're going next. So a little bit about the site history here. For folks who have been following this site for a long time, you might remember that it was intended to be the third phase of Somerset development for many years. So when we first purchased the site from Duquesne Slag Products Company in 1972, there was a lot of environmental contamination. So for folks who don't know, slag is a waste product from the steel manufacturing process. It is a consistency of kind of like a black rock, and if you've ever been in the area, you might see some remnants of the slag today. But essentially, the project site was really a mountain of slag, which shows you really the scale at which steel was being produced in Pittsburgh. There is a local rock band called Slag Mountain that does a little bit of bluegrass too, so I would encourage folks to go check that out after the presentation today. But there's a lot of love and history around this site. People in the neighborhood used to actually use it for a baseball field, and today folks still use the site even though it's technically privately owned. So it's a beloved area, and we're really excited that we were able to clean it up. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that. But yeah, essentially because of the history of the site, it was a brownfield, and going through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Act 2 program. So what that means is essentially the URA and a few other parties entered into consent order and agreement with the PADEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. And we have been a party to that agreement since 2000. Effectively, what that agreement says is that we would need to clean up or remediate the site before any development could occur on that. And that's part of, the Land Recycling and Environmental Standard Act, which I refer to as Act 2. You can see the photo there on the right was the plans for the former Somerset development. And you can see across 9 Mile Run something that looks pretty familiar, which was actually developed. And then on the southern end is what was planned for the site that ultimately we pivoted away from. So the chemicals of concern, let's talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty with slag. When you dig into the site and into the slag, which there's a photo of what some of it looks like on the site, you find high concentrations of arsenic, iron, manganese, thallium, and vanadium. So those are what we call chemicals of concern, and the reason why the remediation or cleanup of the site is necessary. If those particles were to get kicked up, that dust is very harmful for human lungs, especially small humans, so for kids or even dogs on the site. So I talked a little bit about what the former use was considered as potential and highest best use for the third phase of Somerset. So we ended up pivoting away from that for a couple reasons. So firstly, the access road into the site was a challenge. For folks who are familiar with Swisshelm Park, it is a very quiet residential area. And to bring access through those dead-end streets was something that the community couldn't quite come around to. We wanted to respect that, be good neighbors. And so for a while, we were considering an access road through commercial, actually. For folks who are familiar with the 9 Mile Run Trail, there's a parking lot right on Commercial. And the access road was anticipated to potentially come just south of that parking lot. And essentially, that was also a really challenging initiative for a couple of reasons. First of all, the engineering work aside was extremely expensive. So it's a hillside. It would need a significant retaining wall, not to mention that it is covered in trees right now. So we have a lot of huge tree advocates We did a tree study in this area, and actually some of the tree stands in this part of Pittsburgh are some of the oldest growth in the city. And so it was kind of a hard pill to swallow to take down those trees to lead to this development. So we kind of went back to the drawing board at that point. And Nathan Clark, who was a former real estate director at the URA, when I first started there, came up to me and said, Lilly, what do you think about doing some solar on this site? If you do some research and develop that would be possible. And so that was about 5 or 6 years ago now. And it turns out that Nathan had a really good idea. It's a south-facing, flat, cleared area. And it solves some of the issues that the other site we couldn't get around, or the other development plan we couldn't get around. The access road, for example, the solar development, after the construction particularly, has very little flow traffic in and out. It's kind of like typically just one truck doing some regular maintenance, but wouldn't have the same traffic flows that were an issue through the different area. And also that access road to commercial was no longer needed. So for that reason, it's an exciting concept. It helps Pittsburgh meet its climate goals. It's a great location to do some south-facing solar development. And it's a fit for the community as well, which Swisshelm Park, for folks who don't know, it's a neighborhood of environmental advocates that really appreciate the park for what it is today and didn't really want to see it demolished into a new neighborhood, especially given the tree stands that I described. So yeah, what does this look like in practice? It started with a lot consolidation and remediation. I'll get into a little bit further what that remediation looks like on the next slide. We've got room for about 15 acres of solar, and so that is on the flat cleared areas of the site alone. If you look at the bottom photo here on the screen, you'll note a bird's eye view that shows those two flat cleared areas. So that's where the solar is intended to go, and that amounts to about 15 acres. And then at the end of this project, so years from now, once we've got the solar off the ground, the intention is to dedicate the remainder of the approximately 70-acre site to the city of Pittsburgh for park extension. So for now, those 70 acres are technically privately owned by the URA, which we're publicly owned by the URA, but private to city of Pittsburgh residents and park users. And so folks who are using the site are technically trespassing. At that point, once the city of Pittsburgh owns it, it will be usable, safe, healthy, accessible for all as an extension of Frick Park, which is already one of the largest city parks in our region. So it's really exciting to see that expanded. The remediation strategy. So let's get into what it means to remediate a toxic brownfield site. So essentially there are a number of strategies that you can think about. We work with our partners, our civil engineering partners, and also our partners at the DEP, Department of Energy Protection, to define what strategy would work best for us. So we landed on a capping approach. What this means is you bring in a 12-inch combination of clean soil and vegetative topsoil. So once you've got that soil cap on the site where the slag was kind of open and possible to be like kicked up and inhaled, kind of like I described earlier is the main concern. At that point, we bring in a vegetative cover. So the vegetative cover looks different in different places on the site. Some places it's native tree cover, which we got our planting done back in the fall. And we actually just got back onto the site to see how our trees did over the winter and do an analysis of that. In other parts of the site, it looks like a seedling mix. So it looks more like a native grass cover, and mostly those flat, cleared areas where the solar is intended to go. So total volume of the site, we're talking approximately 50,000 cubic yards of soil. So I assume many of you are Squirrel Hill residents, but if you live in Swisshelm Park, then last summer you watched a lot of these trucks go by, day in and day out. So if anyone is from the Swisshelm Park neighborhood, I thank you for your patience with us last summer, getting that soil out to the site. I did have one email from a resident saying that their 3-year-old is obsessed with trucks, so I really made their summer, which was a welcome email after, as you can imagine. Folks it's difficult to deal with all of that truck traffic, and we are understanding of that. So yeah, here we are mostly on the other side. We're about 95% complete with our construction. For the remediation, as I mentioned, we're just going back to make sure the planting took place effectively. So a couple punch list items, but the site is mostly remediated at this point. And then yeah, the post-remediation state for the majority of those acreage is a vegetative meadow. Remediation in action. Here are a few photos from fall of 2025 after we got those trees planted and the meadow wicks laid out. I want to talk a little bit about community engagement. So as the city's redevelopment authority, it is a key part of our process to keep the community engaged along the way. So what does that look like exactly, community engagement? Since 2021, when we essentially broke ties with the Somerset developers and moved forward into this new concept, we had one solar steering committee formed. So back in 2021, we didn't have a RCO, or a registered community group. Today we have Swisshelm Forward, who is relatively new within the past year or two being formed. And so we formed our own community group because we really hadn't developed in Swisshelm Park much, and it was important to have a group to help us engage with folks, get folks into our meetings and establish a community presence. Since that time, we've had 6 public meetings, so that went from establishing a new concept all the way to fundraising. We received a brownfield remediation grant from the Environmental Protection Agency, so a federal grant, highly competitive, and helped us be able to complete some of this remediation work. We had a public meeting related to that to get feedback on our approach. And most recently, actually in April, we had a community meeting to talk about the next phase of the solar. In between there, we did some access road surveys. We had opportunities to share anonymous feedback online, focus group meetings, and the point is to really ensure that folks understand the project and have an opportunity to voice any concerns they might have, or really share and be part of this, this effort as we move forward. So solar development potential. So as you noted on a prior slide, in the bottom picture, there are those 2 flat cleared plats. So we've got those pictured here in a little bit different way. This is an image that was modeled by our solar consultants at Pennsylvania Solar Center. And this shows exactly where on those pads these solar panels will go. So you'll note that the bottom portion of each pad, or the south portion, directionally doesn't have any panels, and that's because of the shade cover in that area. So this model accounts for where the shade cover will be and maximizes the solar potential of the southern facing areas that won't be covered by trees. It's hard to tell from this photo, but there is some slope on the sides of these pads and in between them, and so that's part of why the shade is there. So on approximately 15 acres of land, we believe that we'll be able to generate about 2 megawatts of DC power, or 2,635,000 kilowatt hours of clean energy per year. And so what does that mean in kind of a metric you can understand? Well, we have a very real metric that we're looking to implement for folks who have read on the news recently. This would offset 100% of the electricity costs for 4 local Pittsburgh public schools. So bringing it back to kind of where we are now in this process, in April, the URA's board meeting, so stepping back a little bit, the Urban Redevelopment Authority as the city's redevelopment authority is governed by a board of directors. The mayor's office, so Mayor O'Connor, designates our board chair, who for these first couple months of the year is year-ends over. And so all of kind of the major decisions that we make about development, major contracts we enter into at the URA, our board votes on that and will decide what moves forward and what doesn't. So we were absolutely thrilled to be able to take this to our board after so many years of contemplating this concept. And we requested authorization to enter into a lease agreement with Capital Good Fund for ground solar development. So who is Capital Good Fund, right? Most folks probably haven't heard much about them. Capital Good Fund is a fiscal development partner of the Pittsburgh Public Schools. They are a nonprofit CDFI, so Community Development Financial Institution, and they have gone and reserved the equipment for this project. So for folks who are familiar with solar development tax credits, they're actually have been expiring by the end of the year. And so this is something with kind of the new administration at the federal level. Some of these opportunities for solar development are effectively disappearing. And so there was kind of a quick timeline really at the end of 2025 where there was a moment where we're like, oh, we're not going to be able to do our solar project, right? Like we're not going to be able to get these tax credits in time. And Capital Good Fund was really creative about this. And so what they did is they went and purchased a ton of the materials that are needed to effectively build the panels and what's called safe harboring the equipment. And so they were able to meet the percentage needed of equipment purchased to be able to hold on to the tax credits. So because they were able to do that, and they're funding a number of solar development projects, not just ours. Ours happens to be the largest one, I believe. But because they were able to do that, it really kind of saved the day on our project, and they became a core fiscal development partner. And we were just thrilled that they had the thought and the ingenuity to really take advantage of these tax credits before they expire. So we feel really lucky to be able to work with them on this, and the Pittsburgh Public Schools do as well. So the schools that will be offset in this case need to be within a 2-mile radius of the site. So for folks who are familiar with solar development, maybe you have solar panels on your house even, we are taking a net metering approach for this solar development, which means that the off-taker or the folks who will kind of be offsetting the power that is generated at the site will need to be within a 2-mile radius of the site. So these 4 schools are within that 2-mile radius and are a great fit for the offset partner and really the Duquesne light meter specifically. So the solar that's developed on site will offset 100% of the electricity at Taylor Alderdice High School, Minadeo Elementary School, Greenfield Elementary School, and Linden Elementary School. I happen to be an alumni of Alderdice and Linden, so this is really kind of a full circle moment for me. But I think the real key power of this project is not even really what kind of the Capital Good Fund obviously is a nonprofit partner, so they won't be profiting off of this. The URA will have a minimal land lease cost that we're still kind of in negotiations for, but typically in this region it's about $1,000 per acre. And this is a 15-acre site per year, so about $15,000 a year, which is somewhat minimal compared to, think about the relative size of the site. But the real kind of moneymaker here is the savings for Pittsburgh Public Schools. So you'll note here in the 25-year financial projections, Pittsburgh Public Schools will save $3,500,000 approximately. And so that's huge for them, and that is the comparison, right, to what, if they were to continue business as usual without offsetting their energy costs through the solar development, then they would be able to save, they wouldn't be able to save this money. So we're really excited about this partnership with Pittsburgh Public Schools. It really drives home the community benefit of this project, and we're excited that, you know, Capital Good Fund was able to kind of thread the needle to make this happen for everyone. And really bring the solar to Pittsburgh, specifically because they're not Pittsburgh-based. This is a disclaimer from our friends at the PA Solar Center about those projections. So, these estimates these are purely estimates calculated, and those precise costs and savings may change over time, just so you all know. Capital Good Fund's role. So I think part of the complexity of this project is how everyone's really engaged, right? What does each partner do in this project? And so I'll start with the URA. So our role, we own the land, right? We are the landowner, and we will continue to be through the life of this project. So the URA's only role, really the only contracts we're entering, our only role is to lease the land to Capital Good Fund. So that's how we're engaged. Capital Good Fund's role is the most complicated, right? So they're as a development partner to the URA and PPS, or Pittsburgh Public Schools. Capital Good Fund is responsible for executing that lease agreement with the URA. They're also responsible for executing a power purchase agreement with PPS as the energy user. So those are the two big agreements that we'll need to hash out in the coming months. That's really what we're working on right now. Once those agreements are satisfied and kind of all of the parties are happy with the terms of those, the negotiations are complete, then Capital Good Fund will get into the nitty-gritty of the construction effort. So first is a planning engagement, which is the engineering of the site, and they'll really release an RFP, or request for proposals, for one party to take it from the engineering, design, planning of the site, all the way to implementation. So what does that mean? What are the processes in between to get from the start to the end, right? Well, we've got engineering, construction, and then operations and management. So there's actually typically one party that will manage all of those items. So we're talking a design build contract that also does the operations and management on the back. So yeah, we'll design and build the solar panels and the related infrastructure. So interconnection is a key item here. And actually one of the largest expenses for any solar developer. They have a series of upfront costs, right? And so the interconnection point will actually be on some Duquesne Light service lines that come off of Goodman Street. It's probably a little tough for folks to see in the back there, but Goodman is the furthest south street, or closest to the bottom pictured here, to the right of the site, and that's the Swisshelm Park residential array. So that's where the interconnection work will occur. That infrastructure will need to be built. And an interconnection study will need to occur with Duquesne Light. So managing that interconnection process, that's actually kind of the biggest black box in our timeline. We expect that to take 6 months to a year to actually understand what's needed to complete the interconnection there. And lastly, once the site is designed, we've got plans where the solar is going to go. We're all squared away with Duquesne Light. We've got our interconnection study complete. We've already got a portion of our equipment purchased, right, through Capital Good Fund Safe Harbor, but the remainder of that equipment can also be a question mark in the timeline for implementation. And then once it's all built, we'll be operating. Capital Good Fund will also have a contractor operating and maintaining the site. So they're really doing the heavy lifting here, but community development financial institutions are designed to be able to take some of that risk on and take riskier deals than maybe the typical financial market would in your regular bank lender or something like this. So they're designed to do work like this, but not all of them have such a sustainability mission. So again, we're really grateful that they were interested in our project and came to Pittsburgh to work with us. So what is the proposed timeline here? As I mentioned, there are a couple pieces that are a little bit up in the air, but nonetheless, we've put together what we expect our timeline to be. You'll know in Q2 of 2026, we received that first URA board authorization, which was a really exciting moment for us because, as many of you know, we're in the middle of a mayoral transition. So we really had to convince a whole new slew of city leadership that this project was a good idea. And given some of the uncertainty at the end of the year with the tax credits expiring, there were a lot of moments within the past year where we really weren't sure if we were going to be able to pull this off. But by Q2, we had kind of convinced the city's leadership. We had gotten our board engaged in this development, or re-engaged, I should say, because we did have some new board members as of January 1st this year. We were able to get that authorization to execute that lease agreement, which again is the URA's primary role in this whole deal. So moving forward, as I mentioned, we are going to be completing the remediation. So those final punch list items I described, replacing any trees that didn't quite make it through the winter, reseeding any spots where the grass didn't quite take up. We'll be completing that in Q3 of 2026, and we can, make our claim to fame that we've fully remediated this former brownfield site. So we're all really looking forward to that. And as noted in the great introduction, the remediation of this site is really a sign of us kind of reclaiming land that has been underutilized for decades at this point, and really showing kind of visible scars of our industrial past. So that black rock material, native plants don't really grow on it. It's not something that is a great part of kind of a productive ecosystem. So being able to cap and cover that and plant native trees and grasses on the site is really a win for biodiversity in Frick Park, even if we didn't do the solar at all. So that's a really exciting thing for us to have that milestone almost fully behind us. And yeah, it's a sign of kind of what a sustainable future can look like, restoring and covering up some of those scars from our industrial past. So that's a really exciting moment for us. And then right now a lot of the legal work is going on, so we're negotiating power purchase agreements, the schools and capital good fund, and we're working on our lease agreement for capital good fund to review. So that's what's happening now. We're hopeful by the end of this quarter, and really by Q4 at the latest, because there are some strict timelines with the tax credits that we have to be mindful of. We'll get that solar engineering and construction RFP out on the ground. So that's where Capital Good Fund will engage their contractor, and really in coordination with Pittsburgh Public Schools. So it's a little bit unusual for Capital Good Fund, but Pittsburgh Public Schools will be heavily engaged in that RFP process. And the goal is to, select a contractor that will be able to safely understand that they're working on a remediated site. And so that is a little bit different. There are requirements about taking into the CAP, for example, that contractor will really need to be mindful of a site particularity that makes this solar development somewhat different from others. And so by Q4, we're hoping to have that developer selected. Once we select that developer, the Duquesne Light interconnection study will be initiated. So again, we expect at least 6 months, probably upwards of a year, for that to occur. We're hoping that by 2027, the interconnection study will be complete. And once it is, the utilities construction or the interconnection infrastructure can can begin, and that'll happen before you actually see the solar panels hit the ground. And again, that will likely happen in Q4. We believe the solar panel construction will begin. And then it'll be a full couple quarters, so Q4 and then until in 2027, and then it won't be until Q2 that the solar is fully operational and Pittsburgh Public Schools can start benefiting from that solar power. So that's what you can expect in terms of the development timeline. I do just want to give a quick shout out to KPA Solar Center. So they've been our consultant through this process, and we've been working with them for a little bit over a year now. They're a nonprofit partner focused on solar development in the commercial sector, advocacy, and education. So we work with them through their Get Solar program, which offers full spectrum consulting focused on feasibility assessment, financial navigation, procurement support, and communication strategy. So they've supported us kind of full circle with this project. Not only did they work with Pittsburgh Public Schools to really bring them to the table and get them engaged as the off-taker partner, but they also worked with Capital Good Fund. They were the folks who identified Capital Good Fund, recognized the potential for them to be a partner in terms of their safe harboring of the equipment, and ability to pull the tax credits back into our project. And so we really couldn't be here without them, so I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. And I think that is coming to the end of my presentation. So I can take any questions at this time. Okay, maybe we'll start in the back.
Okay, how much does this cost?
Yeah, so Capital Good Fund is still working on the expense for the actual construction, but we anticipate it will be around $4.5 million.
And so it's $4.5 million to save $3.5 million?
Effectively, yes, that is.
Okay, and then my other question is, Capital Good Fund, are they getting paid too, or?
No, they're a nonprofit partner.
But so where are they getting their money to do this?
I haven't taken like a deep dive into how the CDFI manages their funding, but you can think of them as a banking institution. So a community development financial institution is effectively a type of bank.
So, following up on that question, you hear me all right? There we go. First, I want to commend URA, the city, for undertaking such a progressive initiative, particularly in these times when very few of these initiatives are funded and supported. But following up on the lady's question, the dollars that have been incurred so far, who has paid for that? Is that the URA and the city of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so far, we have financed through remediation in a few different ways. So I mentioned we received a federal grant from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So that was a $2 million grant. And then the URA also has a tax increment financing financial structure in this area that was initiated for the Somerset development, but continued to pivot to be able to remediate this site. So as part of the Somerset TIF, remediation of this particular area was always considered as something that would happen with those funds. So anything that wasn't covered by the grant funding that we got, and actually also some American Rescue Plan Act funds, about $1 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds were used for the remediation, and then the remainder is covered by that TIP.
So none of the dollars, none of the investment came from the city of Pittsburgh's operating budget.
That's correct, but the American Rescue Plan Act that the URA is kind of the financial overseer of, those did come from the city of Pittsburgh. And the tax increment financing, which is kind of a complicated structure of financing, actually takes revenue from taxes that are generated in excess of what would have been generated on the site before future phases of development. Part of those taxes are coming from the city of Pittsburgh's budget.
The other question relates to the application of this energy, the solar energy that's going to be generated beginning in 2028. It seems to me, given the radius you have to work with, what was it, 2.5 miles, I believe, from the site, you're putting all of your dollars and emphasis on the Pittsburgh public school systems and those 4 schools. Do you have assurances that those 4 schools, put aside all the rest, 3 of those 4 schools will still be in operation by 2028, given their financial stress?
Yeah, I mean, we're hopeful that they will be, but there's always an opportunity to pivot if not.
But where would you pivot to? What's your backup plan?
Yeah, I think, it's always possible that there might be other uses in these structures, so that's something that we can consider. But yeah, I think it's something that, we'll reevaluate as time comes. We don't necessarily have like a backup plan in place, assuming that any of them might be with this.
Well, it's Colfax.
What's that?
There's Colfax.
But none of these schools.
Well, it doesn't matter what, you put the energy into the grid, so there's plenty of pivot opportunities. It's not like it's going to have to go to school after that. The one thing I didn't see tonight, I was hoping to see, was some kind of landscape architect rendering of what it's going to look like from Somerset that's developed looking across the 9 Mile Run to the solar farm. I don't know, is that something you may want to consider in the future in a presentation, is once you have the design down, what's the visual impact going to be and how are you going to mitigate that?
Yeah, I think once we engage the firm through that RFP process, that will be doing the design work. And once they've begun that, we believe we'll have more renderings and be able to show some of that visual impact.
I encourage you to show that.
Yeah, thank you.
I probably will ask a little bit technical question.
Okay.
So you will put the solar panel structure. The solar panels take a lot of room and will create a lot of shade. So all the grass that you're planting now will not get enough sun to grow in the future. So it will start to have sort of phasing out slowly. One question, how it will be taken care of so the new soil will not expose the old things that you want to cover. And the other question is, when the solar panel structure will go in, all this remediation, a lot of it will be probably disturbed big time. So how come, what's the methods to protect it?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are definitely methods that you can use that won't go too far into the cap. And so those are the kind that we would be using to develop this particular type of solar panel. So it's very common, actually, in our region, particularly as a post-industrial city and also with a region that has a history so rooted in industrial past. Brownfields to solar developments are a very common reuse and kind of a lower hanging fruit for remediating some of these brownfield sites. And so this is something that solar developers are kind of used to working around in our region, and we'll be sure to design the panels in a way that doesn't disrupt their cap. So that will be one of the goals, as I mentioned, this request for proposals process. We'll be interested in working with contractors who specifically have experience in remediated sites. And I'll also note that brownfields to solar development, just a term for you all to remember, are known as a Brightfield project. And so it's a really exciting opportunity in our region to think of all of the underutilized brownfield sites, the solar potential if we were able to kind of replicate our projects and be able to create bright fields across our region, how much we could really do in terms terms of clean energy power generation. So that's a really exciting opportunity, kind of a niche in our region, these brownfield projects. So yeah, contractors do have experience with that, and we'll be sure to select one that has that experience to design it to fit the site and the cap as we've built it. As far as the grass goes, this is a native seed mix, and we are confident that it will be able to withstand the shade of the panels.
I can't think of any change right now. I'm
You
not-
mentioned that the final cost would be $4 million. Is that into the 25 years that you project out for the cost? Or is that just the final cost of completion?
That is the capital project, so the final cost of completing the actual construction project.
In 2028?
Yes.
So you're not projecting the remaining 23 years left of what it will cost to maintain and operate?
Yes, not in that $4 million and some change budget, but our team at Capital Good Fund and Pittsburgh Public Schools, that's part of what they're doing in navigating their power purchase agreement. So those projections of what operations and maintenance budget will look like, which we haven't seen those projections yet on our end, but that's what they are working on now, to be able to ensure that, you know, once the operations and maintenance budget is kind of pulled out of the money generated from this site, that Pittsburgh Public Schools is still meeting their goals for that savings. Sure.
Just to follow up with what talking about before, the surface of the existing area, remediated and covered over. I mean, Somerset, for 710 residential units were built on the same slag, successfully, carefully monitored all the way by DEP and the Allegheny County Health Department. But it's, first they had just leveling all that slag, dealing with the freshness that we had extremely carefully. I'm sure we've done that with this sort here too. Yeah, adding the solar panels is a lot less complicated than building 710 units of solar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we did take actually the same remediation approach. So we don't have, the foundations that houses would have the infrastructure of the roads, but all of the green spaces in Swisshelm Park or in Somerset Phase 2 and 3. So if you're familiar with Shelburne Park, for example, we are taking the exact same cap and cover approach at Shelburne Park, which we didn't have to, because technically we're building an industrial site here. We could have actually taken it to a less intensive standard for remediation, but we opted to take it all the way to the highest level of standard, which is what occurred at Somerset. And that makes it safe and healthy for anyone to be on the site. So whether you're an adult worker, like someone who might work at an industrial facility, or if you're a very young child with small lungs, anyone can access this site. And the reason we did that, even though it wasn't exactly the lower hanging fruit to pull off this project, was to prepare this site for the long term. So as you may have noted, the URA is leasing this site, right? We're not selling the site for the solar developer. And so at the end of the year of that 25-year lease, there's a possibility, which I think folks know, that energy, even kind of ecosystem we're in right now is quite volatile. This will allow us kind of at the end of the 25 years to decide whether, I think we're all hopeful, folks who are behind this project, that solar will be doing great, and it might make more sense than ever at that time. But there's a possibility at that time to kind of revisit, does this still make sense, and come back to the drawing board. And so I think for folks who are planning ahead for the future, not just kind of in our generation, but generations to come, we wanted to ensure that while we had kind of the fire behind this project, the funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, the TIF and the opportunity with this brownfield cleanup grant, that we were taking it all the way to whatever possible use it might be in the future. And that way no one who's sitting in my seat maybe generations from now as a development manager at the URA won't have to go back to the drawing boards and figure out how to remediate to the level so that maybe, you know, kids could be on the site or someone else for a different use.
Oh, yes. My first question, I think this is totally interesting. We've had solar panels on our house 10, 13 years now. They work out very well. But I'm curious, is there anybody else in the audience, do they have any solar panels on their house for residential use? If you do, can I see a show of hands? Okay, you do. Okay, thank you. That was my question. My next question is, are the conversion points, you're talking about DC power being generated at the solar site, where along the line is it going to be converted to AC? Because our houses are required for AC current.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Any idea?
It's a little bit more technical above my pay grade, but I think it will be at the interconnection.
At the schools, at the four schools?
No, actually on our site where that the power generated here would actually interconnect to the grid. So when I was talking about the lines on Goodman Street, it would be there.
Third question is, comment? Okay, my third question. You're going out to the Pittsburgh airport. There's panels out there along the parkway. Do you know anything about panels? Who owns them? Who's built them out there? The company that built it? Because there's a whole bunch of solar panels going out to the greater Pittsburgh airport.
Yeah, I have toured that site that you're speaking about particularly, and some of the partners engaged there are University of Pittsburgh, the airport, and then some of the folks who own that land are leasing it just like the URA is. And I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, but I have been in touch with the development team over there. They're in a different situation from us of operating at a larger scale. It goes above the net metering approach that we're taking, which is really under 3 megawatts. They're above that margin, and so they actually are working with the regional transmission agency, so the PJM market, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. They're working at that larger distribution scale. So their project isn't exactly an apples-to-apples comparison to ours, but it's also really exciting solar development work in our region, operating at a larger scale.
I had one more comment. Lower. Okay. Our solar panels, when we hit December, January, February, March, we have less solar energy. And we rely on a power source. But it works out well. And I'm taking into consideration that you're backing it up with some type of light Duquesne light power the schools during those months.
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is kind of a common misconception about the net metering approach. A lot of folks think about the panels as going kind of directly to the Pittsburgh Public Schools, putting the lights on in those buildings. And actually, in the net metering approach, all the energy that we're generating on site is going back to the grid, and then essentially just offsetting the energy that is generated at the schools. So basically, the Duquesne Light has kind of a pool of clean energy that we'll be putting our power into effectively, and then the Pittsburgh Public Schools will be kind of party to that pool, and they'll receive a payout for the energy that we have generated on our site, so offsetting their electrical use. But the specific energy that like we're generating in our panels aren't necessarily going like directly to the schools. It's all going back to the Duquesne Lights grid. So they definitely will have a backup, to answer your question.
What determines the 2-mile radius between the generation point and the end user?
Yeah, it's actually the boundary of the parcel. So this was a question that we really had to dive into the fine print of because of some of the other parties that we've considered working with over the years. And we were working with one partner that we were really excited about, but they were actually like 2.2 miles outside of the boundary from the like outer edge of our parcel. And so Duquesne just couldn't work with us, and we couldn't go with that partner. So yeah, that's kind of a challenging part of essentially how Duquesne Light actually interprets Pennsylvania legislation around this rule. There are partners in other parts of Pennsylvania, like Philadelphia, for example, that actually interpret that legislation differently and don't have the same rules around the 2-mile radius. So that was a challenge for us early on in the project, but we're really excited where we've landed despite that.
I just have a last question is, and somebody brought this up, but why Linden and not Colfax, which is closer? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was just about how the sizes of the energy use fit together. So just in terms of like the amount of energy that each school use, those 4 schools fit really kind of like perfectly within the amount that we were generating.
Well, if you need someone to fit in, I can offer my house up as well.
That's a really good point that I didn't get into actually much in this conversation, but early on in some of the community engagement with Swisshelm Park residents, there were a lot of questions. As I mentioned, it's a really sustainability focused community, and there were a lot of questions like, hey, why can't this solar come to our houses, right? And it's something that actually the URA would have been thrilled to consider. But the state of Pennsylvania doesn't have community solar legislation passed the way other states do. So New York, for example, Vermont, New Jersey, a lot of states around us have community solar legislation, which is really exciting because it allows for these smaller scale solar development projects to do exactly what was just asked, right? Like we could have powered your house, your neighbor's house, maybe a full block. We could have maybe powered like this old Swisshelm Park dead-end community, but we don't have community solar legislation in Pennsylvania, so that isn't something that we're legally allowed to do here, which is really a shame. And I do like to mention that because it's a good opportunity to speak to your representatives and your legislators that community solar might be something that you would be interested in. So yeah, unfortunately, we're not allowed to do that without hitting the above 3 megawatt PJM market scale that, for example, that Air Park Port project did or others. So yeah, we couldn't hit that. And even then, the solar would have to go to the regional market. It couldn't just like go directly to a number of different meter holders within an area. So yeah, it's a challenge related to developing solar in Pennsylvania that we're hoping we won't have years down the line, but we still have it today.
Thank you, Lilly. That's quite informative. There's a lot more going into this than we were thinking about, that's for sure. And working out there in that Glen, Somerset also, and looking across right now, those trees look pretty nice. I think it's going to be a good look. So we couldn't get pickleball courts over there or anything, so we had to go with the solar, I guess. Okay, I really appreciate you coming here and giving this talk and informing everybody of what's going on. So thank you very much. And also, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight, and next month, we have another meeting.